I don't know how to talk about this stuff. I know how to talk about this stuff. I can talk about it for hours when I don't have a microphone attached to me, but I can't think clearly when I do. I told you can have hours of editing.
I've been really lucky and I've not found any prejudice throughout my time in the outdoors. I started paddling when I was 11, started competing when I was 12, and when I was 13 was selected for a female-only development squad in Scotland. So from that point of view, at the time I didn't realise how far ahead thinking that was and how ahead of its time. But looking back now, I realise that I was really lucky to have that and have an extremely positive female role model at the time and subsequently. Although a lot of the people I've worked with have been male. I've not had many female colleagues until I came here, really. A couple, but not many, and certainly not in the higher end of the sort of management side of things. They've all been male. But I'm not particularly girly, never have been, so it hasn't been that much of an issue. Whether I have moulded myself to become one of the boys, to fit in, or whether that was going to be my natural progression anyway, I'm not quite sure. But whatever, it's worked for me. And I've been really lucky and never faced sort of any sort of prejudice or any bias at the fact I'm female. In fact, they're usually quite pleasantly surprised at me being not a wuss and quite strong.
Well, I think one super positive thing that's come out in recent years are all the cool initiatives to get more women and underrepresented folks involved, and how well they've been supported by everyone. So it's been really great to see different types of folks with different life experiences getting out in ways that work for them, like having people running courses who understand these things, like juggling home life, or like how your cycle affects your performance and your levels of bravery in outdoor situations. When I was doing my MCI, one of the main things that I was really stressed about was my climbing ability, whether I could climb hard enough, whether I could climb VS confidently and competently. And every male trainee they asked gave a really well-intentioned and a really lovely response of like, well, have you tried doing this, this and this to get better at climbing? Which is really cool and some really good advice. But when I then went to the female trainees, pretty much unanimously, they all just said like it was, they all just said, like, you climbed that you won the other day, like absolutely fine. It's not your climbing ability, it's how you perceive the situation. And like they all immediately identified that it was like more of a mental block than a physical one. So it's just that like shift in perspective. And, you know, like generally there'll be a slightly different way of perceiving situations, or I think there's things that are unique to our body shape, like how our psychology might work in different ways, that we identify that maybe like might not have been an issue so much for men, so they don't relate to it in the same way. It's all like, I struggle talking about this sort of stuff as well because it's all a massive generalisation. Like, yeah, like I'm massively against gender stereotyping, but a lot of these things are gender stereotyped. Like I have experienced. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how to describe it. But yeah, I guess the main thing is just like, it's really positive to see how the industry as a whole, well, it's really positive to see how the outdoors as a whole has like got behind these programs to get more women doing outdoor stuff, and like recognizing barriers that they might not necessarily have identified before and like working through them. And yeah.
Being a woman in the outdoors is like, there's so many things you could complain about, and yet sometimes it's almost nicer to just look at the positives. Like 100 years ago, I think if we wanted to go hiking up the mountains, we'd be wearing skirts for decency's sake. And now it's just difficult to kind of find trousers that fit both your waist and your thighs. And I could go on and on about how women's clothing in the outdoors doesn't necessarily fit women's bodies, but it's sometimes nice, yeah, just to look on the bright side and say like, You're gonna edit a lot of this out, right? Because I am liking a lot. Yeah, like sometimes, I think especially like back when I was guiding and things, like you do get snarky comments from men, usually men, and sometimes you just have to brush them off, and I think it's something that a lot of people will think, oh, it's a bit of a joke, but you just sometimes hear it too often. But I do think that we're kind of moving towards, especially this sort of new generation of young men who I don't feel like I get treated any differently than my male peers a lot of the time. I think it is very much a generational thing when you think about sexism in the outdoors, and I think it is on its way out slowly as we move forwards, which is really nice to see the development. And again, I'm talking about this as a UK-based, very privileged to be in this country situation, but I do think it is getting better. What did I write there? Something about pink. I think, yeah, when I was a kid, I was very anti-pink. I was very anti-girly. I think I wanted to prove myself as much as possible. And I think sometimes I had this idea that if I wore dresses, wore pink, things like that, people would kind of assume that I can't do things, that I'm incompetent. And then I sort of reconsidered that as I got a bit older, and I was like, why would people think that? And it's like, maybe it's not the pink, maybe it's who I am, maybe it's being a woman. Some people are always gonna look down on that. And I think now, like, pink boat, lend me a bit of pink. I like the more and more clothing options we are getting, more colour options for women. And sometimes I will choose pink. It's nice to have a pink boat and be going down a river and have a little girl on the side of the river go, oh, I love your boat. I'm like, that makes me happy. But at the same time, I don't want to be canned into a hole where it has to be pink.
It's overlooked mainly by males, I would say, because they don't have to live with it on a regular basis. And as a mountain leader, it's a good thing to consider when taking groups out, especially younger females, because they could be caught short. And in my talk that I did, I made like a little hygiene pack that had all the essentials for females, so it could be given in discretion and not make them feel uncomfortable. And generally just disposal in the mountains of sanitary products is a consideration. And when it's blowing a gale force wind and it's raining and trying not to be inappropriate.
I can edit round it.
Just trying to... Nope. Even when you're doing training, menstruation is something that needs to be considered, because there's certain times when women are more effective and less effective, more energy levels. So like when women are actually bleeding, they have more energy levels, but then they have the issues of dealing with that. Yeah, I'm referring to tampons. They're not ideal. There's a whole speech about that as well. Like, they can cause toxic shock. So if a woman's in the mountains and they have, say, a tampon in and they're too scared to take it out because of the environment they're in and the people they're around, then they could end up getting toxic shock. So it's ideal for people to know how to recognise toxic shock as well. Yeah.